as Sergeant Chamberlain in the Battle of Yorktown in the Revolutionary War. His grandfather had fought in the War of 1812, and his father had fought in a little-known skirmish called the Aroostook War, or something along those lines, which was just a nonsensical battle between Canada and Maine to decide what the borders were. So he was obviously felt the compulsion to participate in the Civil War. Consequently, none of his colleagues, the professors at Bowdoin College, agreed with him, and they signed petitions to try to get him removed. Nevertheless, he voluntarily removed himself and joined the draft. Now, as was typical of the time during the draft in 1862, especially in small towns, is the first guy through the door, the first most capable guy through the door, became the leader of the regiment or the leader of the unit. And Joshua Chamberlain was no different. He came through the door, educated, spoke 9 languages, and they said, "You are in charge of the 20th Maine." And they said, "And you're going to be a colonel." Well, as humble as he was, he knew what it took to be a colonel, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal today to be a colonel. And he said, "I can't possibly be a colonel, but I will be a lieutenant colonel." Humble guy. Nevertheless, fast forward 11 months, and he finds himself a full colonel now, earned on the battlefield, and in a farm in Pennsylvania. Now, up until this point, in July of 1863, most of the Civil War battles have been fought in Virginia, and the Virginians were tired of it. They were tired of both armies looting property and foraging the fields and such like that. So the Southern strategy from General Lee was to push it up into the north to break the will. The Northern strategy was, at this point, trying to win, because they had lost 3 major battles by this point: Sharpsburg, Chancellorsville, and Antietam. And so they find themselves on a big farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I find it ironic, kind of funny, that the Army of the South is fighting to the north, and the Army of the North is fighting to the south. That seems ironic to me. Nevertheless, the battle is lined up. 75,000 Union soldiers, 82,000 Confederate soldiers lined up on this farm. And on this farm, the Union Army has set up on top of this mound called Round Top. It's a round, granite outcropping. And on July 2nd, Governor Warren, yes, that's his first name, Governor Warren. I wonder if his parents were disappointed that he only became a general. But Governor Warren was the chief engineer. General Meade sent him out and said, "Take a look at our situation, take a look at how we're deployed, and tell us what you can see." He goes out to the far left side of the front of the Union Army, and he sees this little mound, this little no-name mound. It actually came to be known as Little Round Top, but it was a no-name mound on the far left side of the Union Army. And he looked back at his cannoneers and he said, "We're kind of vulnerable here. Can you guys fire a cannon across the Confederates that are amassing there at the bottom of the hill?" And of course the cannoneer did, and then he watched and saw all of the Confederate soldiers that were massing down at the bottom of the hill. Their weapons and their bayonets and everything started to shine, and he panicked. And he immediately called over the 20th Maine. The 20th Maine that started a year before with 1,621 men, by this time was now down to 266. And the colonel in charge told now Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain that you have to hold this spot at all costs. Do not let it go. It was the far left side, I think I mentioned already. Well, on July 3rd, 1863, the rebels, the 15th Alabama and the 47th Texas, well over 400 to 500 men, started rushing up that hill towards the 20th Maine. They came charging up the hill, yelling and screaming as they came up. Colonel Chamberlain hardly had any time to set up any protection. His stone wall was probably no taller than from the lectern to my hand here, just enough so that they could lay down to protect themselves from the bullets. Well, the rebels came up the hill, and the 20th Maine valiantly fought them back, pushed them back down the hill. They came up a second time, yelling and screaming, shooting and shooting. Pushed them back down, the 20th Maine did. They're covering over the bodies looking for bullets because it's just 266 guys against hundreds of rebels. The Alabama and Texas boys came running up again, yelling and screaming as they came up the hill. And again, the 20th Maine fought them back. By this point, Colonel Chamberlain, his brother, Sergeant Tom Chamberlain, at his side, he said, tell the guys to go pick over the bodies, get the guns, get whatever bullets we can. He says, we did that last time. He said, well, do it again. How many bullets do we have? He says, well, he says, most guys don't have any bullets, and I only have one. His other brother, John Chamberlain, was his Bible secretary, which I don't know what he was going to do if the rebels ran over this wall. At any rate, Colonel Chamberlain, who is not one to fall into inaction, decided he was going to make a bold move. He decided to do, and he told his men, we're going to do a great right wheel. What's a great white wheel, you ask? I'll tell you. The great white wheel is essentially where you flank your enemies. You just pull a wheel just like going around them. It's just going around your enemies, and that's what he did. As he got on his white horse, yes, it was a white horse, he pulled out his sword, he hollered at his men, fixed bayonets, and then he jumped over the wall and headed down the hill and yelled, charge! And the 20th Maine ran down that hill, just as well over 400 rebels were coming up the hill. The rebels, hearing the scream and hearing the yells, thought that the 20th Maine had been reinforced, and many of them dropped their guns, their loaded guns with bullets, right where they stood, and ran down the hill. By the time Colonel Chamberlain got to the bottom of the hill, one of the officers from the Alabama regiment pointed his gun right at Colonel Chamberlain's face and pulled the trigger. And nothing happened. At which point, Colonel Chamberlain pulled out his sword, put it right at his throat, and said, you, sir, are my prisoner. Anecdotally, one of the privates at the end of the war, at the end of that battle, as they were guarding 400 rebel prisoners, and by this time the 20th Maine was down to 80 men, this private inched over to Colonel Chamberlain and said, sir, I'm guarding these guys, but I don't have any bullets in my gun. Colonel Chamberlain said, well, don't tell them that. The Battle of Little Round Top. Historians now look at this battle over a no-named hill that became named because of this battle, the Battle of Little Round Top, as the pivotal battle in the Battle of Gettysburg that we heard an address of earlier. And the Battle of Gettysburg, historians also note, is probably the pivotal battle in the entire Civil War. If the Union had lost Gettysburg, the Union would have lost the Civil War. And historians now conjecture that if the Union would have lost the war, the Confederates would have won the war, the United States would have been a confederate of independent states, not the United States that we've come to appreciate. And if you take that argument a little bit further, as the title of my speech is, the Civil War battle that won World War II, you have to think about World War II. Who would have been able to stand up to the German invasions of Europe, the Axis powers, the Japanese invasion of Asia? Who was left to stand in the gap? Well, there was no one left. Everyone was involved in World War II. The only country left was the United States of America. And so, my friends, this little battle, less than 1,000 men involved, hundreds died. Because of this battle, the United States and the Allies were able to win World War II. And what happened to Colonel Chamberlain? Well, he became a general. He eventually became the governor of Maine, and just the epitome of irony, he also became the president of Bedford College. And it makes me wonder, what happened to all those professors that had signed the petition to have him fired? Thank you.